How's it going? I'm Andrew with Investors Hub, and it's Clem's Day Wednesday, so today we're talking with Clem Chambers, and we're chatting with him about inflation. It's because we got the new CPI data recently, 5.5% year-over-year inflation, which does not look good, and it's sparking more and more fears about inflationary pressure. And I wanted to talk to him about how he thinks that all this is going to progress moving forward. And he also talks to us about how he calculates inflation and where he's getting his projected numbers from. So if you like the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to hit that notification bell button. You can follow us on Twitter, myhub_vision. And after a quick disclaimer, we'll hear from Clem. Please note that our videos are not designed to be direct investing advice. Our channel and our content should just be one stop on the journey of trying to find out where to put your money. So Clem, we got really bad CPI data here in the US, and you expressed in the past that you don't think that the government is going to pull back on QE and let the market crash, because that basically just be, well, here's your pink slip on the way out. I'll see you later. So how do you think that people should be navigating this fear of inflation given all this quantitative easing?
Well, I think the way to look at it is not to look at it as, oh, here's inflation, oh, gold should go up. And, I've been thinking hard about this because, gold went up really strong last year. And since then, with inflation coming, it's been falling up until recently where it's now bouncing. And it's always a mistake to think the market's wrong. I mean, it doesn't matter how right you think you are. If the market disagrees with you, work out why rather than say, oh, it's wrong. And I scratched my head for a long time about it. And then I came up with what I think is the answer, which is actually really obvious when you think about it. Now, the market always looks ahead about a year. Okay? Well, funnily enough, if you look back a year, gold is at the high. So it was calling inflation in a year's time, i.e. now. And then it fell off because it was then predicting that COVID was all over, or at least the worst of it was over, and that, the government would taper a year out, which would be the end of this year. Okay? Well, now Delta's come along, the Delta variant, and there's going to be different variants. Now that is the penny that is dropping for the market right now, which is why it's a little bit wobbly. And what it really means is the governments won't be able to just tighten because it's all over. Not that they probably would have anyway. And if they did, they would tighten slowly and et cetera, et cetera. But we could have got 50 to 100% inflation. So say call it 50%. But with Delta and with more COVID problems, for as far as the eye could see, this printing is going to carry on going. There's going to be no tightening. They're going to have to keep printing to keep filling the hole that they're making with their budget deficits, which those budget deficits are coming from the economic pressure from COVID. So to cover those deficits, fiscal deficits, and also, import and export deficits as well, trade deficits, they've got to keep printing. So that means we're going to get more than 50 to 100% inflation. We're maybe going to get 100 to 200% inflation. But the market is working it out as it goes because it's looking a year out. It's looking to next July. It's not looking to the July after next. It's just looking to next July. And it's seeing that this is not transitory inflation, which, I think is pretty obvious. But of course, if they'd been able to shut down inflation and keep it at 30, 40%, then that would have filled in the deficit hole that all these countries have built up, would have realigned GDP to be in line so that they could make taxation to get back to the 3% deficit and 3% GDP growth, which was the gold standard of the past. Well, now they're going to have to inflate more because now they're not going to be catching up with those GDP targets. They're not going to get the growth that they expect. And there's no end in sight for COVID. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be as bad as it was. Could be worse, of course, because you could get a variant that is worse. But even in a steady state, there's no end in sight now, as far as the market's concerned. So up gold is going because inflation expectations for the market is that there's going to be no taper next year. There's going to be no tightening next year. And the printing press is going to carry on running hot into this time next year. And as that threshold goes out to next month and the month after, if this picture is unchanged, so gold would reflect the fact that the QE that we've become used to is not suddenly going to go away. It's going to carry on potentially indefinitely, or certainly for many, many years to come. And that will, of course, drive inflation and drive all the precious metals along with it.
So I'm curious to see, like, how do you make your estimation of 30, 40, 50% inflation?
It's an interesting calculation. You've got to synthesize it really, but it's very, very interesting that the data coming out of the Fed has muddied the water on M1 and M2. They've gone and changed the measurement. And you've always got to be very suspicious about that. M1, M2 explodes, and then suddenly they go, oh, no, we're going to calculate it differently now. Oh, we're going to rebase it all. You know, that for me said it all. But what I look at is not necessarily money supply so much as your debt to GDP. Now, people are comfortable at 80%. It used to be 60%, but they pushed it out to 80%. And now they're all going hell for leather for 100% and more than 100%. Well, I think the US is just over 100 now. But, you know, this is not a situation where the deficit spending is going to go away. So when is it going to stop? Well, it's going to get to 150, isn't it? Well, to get back to 100 or to get back to 80, you're going to have to get 50% or more inflation to right that ship, to basically debase your currency enough to actually get over your debt, to make that debt shrink in real terms, because it's about nominal terms. You know, if you have 100% inflation and you're earning twice as much as you were before that started off, you're earning the same amount of money. So they will be looking to make the debt smaller by making GDP larger, because of inflation. So the nominal numbers go up, the nominal value of the debt goes down. And at some point, the two things cross and you've got back to that balance again. Well, that's what they're trying to do now, and that's what they're going to be trying to do in the future. But the more you push out these deficits, the more you push out all these stimuluses, the more you print money, the more inflation you're going to get. But remember, they're only printing money to fill up the deficit. If you look at the rate of QE, it's about the same as the American fiscal deficit. Funny that. Yeah. So these are really smart people, and they're trying really, really hard to keep the wheels on. And they will keep the wheels on, even if it means there's 500% yearly inflation. And they won't do it by accident. It will be because the situation's really, really dire. Well, the situation's not dire, but it's bad enough that we're going to need 8, 9, 10% inflation at some point in the future. We're going to need maybe 150% inflation, 200% inflation over the next 5 years. Yeah, it's not going to go, Germany or Hungary in the 1950s, or forever in Turkey or Venezuela. The only way that would happen is something absolutely catastrophic happened with COVID, and there's nothing on the horizon to suggest that. But this situation of big fiscal deficits because of suppressed economic activity and huge liabilities in terms of government overhead is going to mean that they're going to have to keep printing, and that will drive elevated rates of inflation. Let's think of it as elevated rates, and those elevated rates, pretty soon you get into a rebasing of what things cost. So inflation is real, and the market is now seeing past a tightening that might have happened in the latter part of this year, and it's looking out to next year and going, tightening, maybe not, probably not. No, probably going to have to. Oh dear, this Delta thing. Oh, that's looking a bit, iffy. Oh, that means they're going to be printing for a lot longer than expected, and therefore you're getting to see that in the precious metal prices.
Hey, thanks for watching. And if you hadn't already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell button, and I'll see you again soon.